in this area here was the recce, the RV point. Now, we can talk about where that was, but I believe it's somewhere in this area here. It's described as well as having like a tree, a very bushy tree on a bank with a ditch. So when you're down, you can't quite see it, but the area where we've come from is actually lower than this, and we've actually come up a slope. So when you're down here and you've landed and you're trying to orientate yourself, obviously you'll probably have a compass, but there is a slight rise, as you can see, towards the objective. You've got the village here, so it would kind of make sense that your rendezvous point might possibly be at the eastern side of Gonneville, near a road, near a crossroads, So I've been putting it together, a map, and this is it here. And you can, where we are right now is basically where that says RV on the bottom right hand corner, and the battery is over there. So George Adser then has gone off to the RV. He we can talk about Alan Parry's adventures later, but he remembers when he Adser had already been at the RV when he got there. And so George Smith then carries on. They talk about, it gets a little bit of confusion about where he goes. But he talks about a hedge. The next hedge junction we met was thick. So I think I don't know whether this is a modern part of the village or not, but he talks about he's heading up basically to this point here. Now, on my map, this point is that the firm base. So I believe that there's an RV point that funnels all the people to an RV point, and then the RV point moves up to this place, because from this point on, we then get into the defenses that surround this battery, which is here. Okay, so George Smith is pushing forward. And he talks about pushing through fences, then realizing it's quite noisy. He remembers almost falling into the lap of two Germans somewhere around here, and not engaging them, knowing he's disciplined to know that he can't get into a fight with these guys. He's literally got to back away and keep pushing to his objective. He talks about crossing some open country. He talks about 600 yards of open country, which he was going to go across on a compass bearing, but then realizes there's minefields that hasn't been identified. He also describes in this area here finding Rommel's Asparagus, these posts dug into the ground. He says trying to go across the field, presumably somewhere in this area. He comes across 2 posts 30 yards into the field, 15 feet apart. Very solid, dug in, well into the ground. And between, and this is something I didn't know, but he describes that there was a wire that stretched between these 2 posts. And they started at a height of 6 feet on one post and ending at 3 feet on the other. So this is, when you're in one of these horse gliders, this is head height. This is, if you go into these, trying to avoid the posts and you hit this wire's just going to cut straight through your horse glider, literally at sort of head height. He describes the wire as being too thick as well for it to be cut. So, but when we hear about some of these Pathfinder guys jumping down to clear these things, these are the things that they're blowing up. Okay, so he's at this point he says they were very nearly across the open ground, and when they could hear the flak guns begin to fire, and I'm going to guess he's in this area here. And he looks up, and presumably from this direction where we came from, he spots these dark silhouettes of the Dakota aircraft coming in. And they keep coming in for about 15 minutes. And from what I can determine, this is means it begins at sort of 1:45. We know from Major John Howard it was about 10 to 1. So let's say it begins at sort of 10 to 1, 15 minutes, and then he says these Dakotas arrive, and they're carrying the rest of the battalion are coming in. He recalls thinking that they were ranging from 500 to 1,500 feet. And then he sees this... He says all these trace of fire, then fires up towards these shapes, and he, where he is, say in this area, he then can pick out all the positions of the machine guns firing. So he describes how he couldn't see many parachutes falling because of the dark. Sometimes he could spot them for a few seconds. But what he could do, though, was see these the points where these machine gun nests are. He could spot the ones that are in his vicinity and the ones around him, and that allowed them then to change their route around them. He then talks about reaching what's known as cross tracks, and one that led directly to the outer perimeter of the battery. This here, I believe, is what they called the firm base, and I think what he's talking about is these sort of cross-track kind of here, and this is the one that goes to the battery. He says the battery was the outer perimeter of the battery was about 600 yards away. So, probably. So he describes the area as being open, which it still does here. A small hedge with a ditch alongside it. As you say, he wanted to cut across on a compass bearing, but he decides not to because there's minefields that hadn't been identified. And he could spot these minefields because the RAF had missed its target. The bombs had fallen into the minefields around it, and then he could see these lines of explosions in the ground where they had laid them in lines. He talks about how they were trying to get to a position that they called Wood 2. Now, I'm not particularly sure where that was. It could have been some of these groups of trees. Probably not even there now. When they get to the this area, they start to. They leave one of the guys behind, and then two of them move forward, and then they start recceing the area. We can see here, this is the direction of the main gate, as you can see on the map at the top, and this route across here was the main assault route into the area. When he gets here, he actually finds that it's very quiet, and that troubles him. He's not even sure if anyone is there. So he has to. He does a recce where they're crawling through these minefields. They're cutting the wires. They're leaving a trail, and they're to lead them back, to lead the assault group through. and he pushes on. They split, the two of the guys, Miller and him, crawl around on the inner, near the inner wire, just to try to find the best places to enter. He describes not being worried about the anti-tank mines because he didn't think his weight would trigger them. And they find different patches of wire that are thicker than others, and mark it down. He then decides that he's probably seen enough here. He observes some of the, when he gets to observe these guys firing at stuff. He talks about how an aircraft towing a glider comes across, and that gives him the ability to spot where certain machine gun positions are in the battery. So he says, this is his words, he says, almost simultaneously 4 machine guns inside the battery open fire with tracer, aiming at this glider, which the glider and the aircraft carrier are flying straight. He recalls a 20mm flak gun nearby, and so he just sits still and watches all this. So at this point he decides that he's seen enough, that he knows that the battery's occupied, and he's got a good idea of his defenses, and so he decides to pivot round, come back, and crawl out of the position. He's now trying to hook up with the taping party. So he's gone ahead, he's identified these places where they can use these Bangalore torpedoes, the long tubes that you can shove underneath the wire. And it's the job of the taping party now to mark a path from the firm base to the point where they do the breach. He moves. He comes back and he grabs. He leaves. This time he leaves Miller in this area. So he's always informing the people in his team of what he's seen. He's never keeping his team all together. So if one part of the team is taken out, that the information can be passed on. So he's told Miller now, or Miller was with him, so Miller was one of the guys doing the recce's. He's now taking Harold back with him. So he's going back with information. Miller's got information back up here. As he says, he's sliding back down the lane. He comes across a guy, Captain Paul Greenway, and he is part of the taping party. There's a little bit of confusion about some mortaring that possibly is going on. They talk about the Germans shelling the cross track, so I'm not sure whether they already knew their place, but it's a bit weird. It's something I'll have to have another look at. But he says when he came back this way, he gets to the firm base, and the battalion's not there. And he starts to get worried because time was getting short. I'm not certain of what time we're talking about now. I think we're talking possibly around about 2:30 by now. It's always very difficult because you can never tell which time they're using. There's a summertime GMT. There's double summertime. So this is known as firm base at the near to Gonneville, which is this village here. But once he gets here, I mean, it's around about 2:30. We know that, and we'll talk about it later, with that Otway gets to his RV at around about 2:30, and he pushes on. So I think 2:30 is probably about the right time. He says that it doesn't take him long to meet up. He says he doesn't have long to wait, and then he could see the head of a column, presumably coming up this road. Coming up here. And he says they remained in cover, and then whispers the password, which I think in this section it's Punch and Judy. They also had little duck whistles, I believe. He then reports that Lieutenant Colonel Otway wasn't too far behind, and he provides Otway with some of the better news he's had so far, which is basically that that he didn't believe there was any surprises up ahead. And he's instructed by Otway to lead the battalion, and so he turns around and then moves this way to the starting off point. So at this point, I think it would be good then to leave this stream for now, and when we do the next stream, we'll